What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Randy here with RTS Mobile Gaming, bringing you a Dynamite video today. We are playing the Lord of the Rings Rise to War, and in today's video we're talking about elite unit abilities from Zrob's Theoden here in Season 7 Tactics Evolve campaign, okay? So, we're going to be looking at how this level 43 Theoden with very similar gear to this level 48 Theoden was able to completely dominate the battlefield based almost entirely on his elite unit abilities. Builds matter, as Zrob said earlier today. Love you long time. Here we go. So, we'll spend 30 seconds on the opposing Theoden to look at the build that we're fighting against. You can see it is a pretty competent build running bottom R0, R3, and the R5 tree. This build is actually very standard for Theodens across the board. Really not a whole lot of outlying factors here. Okay, we have a nice Mirror's Reigns with some good HP and attack. Okay, we've got Reach of the Rittermark, we've got anti-burn damage chest, and we have a Horseman's Helm with anti-madness. Okay, for the units themselves, Cavaliers are in here. He doesn't have an elite ability selected here on the Cavaliers. Okay, the Cataphracts, we are running with a level 10 out of 10 Remedy elite ability. This is the tier 2 elite ability. This increases the healing received and causes you to deal some damage when you get healed. Just to give you some perspective, if this were maybe a full march of Cataphracts, this might be dealing anywhere from, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,500 damage per Remedy tick, depending on the target they're hitting. So I imagine with only a partial march, you'll see somewhere around 800 to 1,000 damage ticks from Remedy. And then lastly, the Bow Knights. We have the Bow Knights here with Dispersion, which is pretty standard Bow Knight skill, okay? High damage output. Alright. Into Zrob's build, as you can see here clearly, right? 7 less skill points. He's 5 levels lower, 43 versus 48. 5 less command. Gear is pretty equivalent, right? Some 5-star purples. He's got a slightly better chest for sure. But overall, bonus damage to mounted here, or bonus damage for his mounted units here. And he has a healing accessory on instead of plus damage and HP like the opposing Theoden, okay? But really what is going to differentiate Zrob from the opponent is the fact that he has 7 points in mounted combat, which, as you know, is the build I like to run as well. Mounted combat is glorious. 7 points here, and then all of his elite unit abilities have been selected to cause additional mounted combat triggers, okay? For example, the Dragoons, they are using the Rupture ability, which is going to add damage to his march. It's going to also have an additional 50% chance to trigger another damage instance per round, which means that every time the Dragoons attack, they actually have 1.5 chances to trigger the mounted combat proc, okay? So 50% more chances to trigger mounted combat on the Dragoons. Then we go into the Raiders. Raiders, even though they have plus 20% damage against mounted, they only end up doing about 12% more damage to mounted than Bow Knights, because Bow Knights have higher base damage across the board. So they have a little bit of a benefit here, but really the important part is the Eradicate ability. Eradicate will attack all enemies on the field with the auto attack, okay? If you're hitting 3 targets on the field, you're already dealing 50% bonus damage, more than if you're hitting 1 target. For 100%, 3 targets for 50 is 150% damage. In addition, each hit of Eradicate has a chance to trigger mounted combat. So we are going from 1 mounted combat proc to potentially 3 mounted combat procs and more damage per attack each round, okay? And lastly, Bow Knights, again, Dispersion is going to have 3 chances to trigger mounted combat per round, in addition to the auto attack for a 4th chance. So we are going up by 400% increase in mounted combat triggers on the Bow Knight, 300% increase in mounted combat triggers on the Raiders, and a 50% mounted combat increased chance to trigger on the Dragoons, okay? So in total, you're looking at 7.5 additional chances per round to trigger mounted combat. in addition to the basic additional damage added, right? 50% additional damage added from Eradicate, and the 45% additional added damage from dispersion, and the 10% additional added damage from rupture. Okay, so damage, damage, damage. Since Theoden is the strongest damage commander for his army in the game, this is a big deal. Okay, anything you can do damage-wise on Theoden is going to be multiplied exponentially. All right, because Theoden is amazing. So I haven't even opened this report yet, by the way. Rob sent this to me. I looked at it, and I decided to make a video. We're opening it for the first time here today. Excuse me. All right, so Cavaliers coming in hot and heavy on the opposing side, hitting for 11-7. Bow Knights, here is the dispersion on the enemy Bow Knights, triggering mounted combat. Look at that. We have one mounted combat proc off dispersion from the opposing Bow Knight. Here we go. Theoden is getting ready. Okay, Zrob's Theoden's Raiders are coming in hot and heavy with a Eradicate attack. They're going to hit all the targets on the field. Okay, this is also going to activate their hero up to max level in round 1. You can see the third sweep of the Eradicate does hit and trigger a mounted combat right here. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. The second and third hit of Eradicate trigger mounted combat. So you have 16,500 damage, 16,500 damage from Eradicate's mounted combat triggers in round 1. Here comes the Bow Knights with dispersion. Okay. No triggers from dispersion. We have an auto attack. No trigger from the auto attack. That's okay. And lastly, let's see what the Dragoons do here. I'm really interested to see how the Dragoons work out. Okay, so they did not trigger that additional 40% damage hit in round 1, and no mounted combat triggers. So we're still looking at 2 mounted combat procs from Eradicate from the Raiders in round 1. Here in round 2, okay, enemy Cavaliers trigger MC. The Bow Knights don't trigger MC on their dispersion, but they trigger MC on their auto attack. Into Theoden's units now, Zrob's Theoden. We have more Eradicate damage punching away. We have 2 mounted combat triggers again from Eradicate, guys. He is hitting 3 targets. He is triggered 2 times. Ooh, I have an emergency alert. Oh my goodness. Oh, stop. Okay, here we go. Okay, Jeep Wrangler stolen. All right. 2 mounted combat triggers in round 2, guys, from the Raiders. Here comes the Bow Knights. The dispersion does trigger 1 mounted proc in round 2 from the Bow Knights. This is what we like to see. And let's look at the Dragoons. I want to see the Dragoons triggering. There's a Rupture proc. Here's a Rupture proc, ladies and gents. We have bleed damage. We have Rupture proc. I mean, that's some good damage here with no MC proc. Okay. But you get the picture. I don't need to go through 8 more rounds of this. You understand that the AoE damage and the additional 7.5 chances to trigger mounted combat every round compared to the enemy Theoden, who only has... and yes, you know, the Remedy can actually trigger it. So that's unique, but Cavaliers don't deal... Cataphracts don't deal a whole lot of damage. But you can see that the 7.5% additional chances for the DPS mounted units to trigger mounted combat is going to cause a massive upset in damage output, which is very clear from the results on this report. Okay, so like and sub. Thank you, Zrob, for sharing this report. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the analysis. Like and sub. Here we go.